This is the story of Grace, a single mother of two who fed a mute beggar every day, not knowing that he was a wealthy man. This is the testimony that kindness pays and that when God remembers you, it will be like a dream. The Enugu sun rose early, golden rays crawling across the corrugated rooftops of Coal Camp. Inside a narrow wooden structure wedged between a tailor's shop and a broken kiosk, Grace was already arranging peak milk tins and packs of cabin biscuits on her old iron shelf. Her provision store wasn't much, just a creaky stall made of planks and nails, covered with rusted zinc, but it was hers. It was where she worked from dawn till dusk, selling sweets, matches, Gary, detergent, and anything her tiny capital could afford. Grace was 36, a widow with two children, Ada, who was 10, and her younger brother, Chuka, only 6. Their father, a mechanic, had died 3 years earlier in a ghastly accident on Zik Avenue, leaving her with nothing but debts and grief. Since then, Grace had become father and mother, waking early to grind pepper, fetch water, and walk her children to school before opening her shop. Her hands were always busy, but her smile never faded. "Good morning, Auntie Grace," children would call as they passed on their way to school. She'd wave with her ever-warm reply, "Morning, my dear. Go and learn well, oh." That morning, like many others, Grace noticed him again, the silent figure who always came just before noon. He wore the same threadbare brown jacket, frayed at the sleeves, and khaki trousers rolled up at the ankles. His hair was white, uncombed. His skin, a tapestry of dust and sun. He moved slowly, dragging one foot behind him, the other pushing an old wooden crutch. The townspeople called him Oni Agbamiri, the rain-soaked one, but Grace had come to know him simply as Mr. Leo. Mr. Leo never spoke. Not once. Some said he was mute. Others believed he was mad. But every day, he came to sit across from Grace's store, his back against the wall of the abandoned phone booth. He would rest there under the mango tree, eyes half closed, head bowed, never begging, just sitting quietly. The first time Grace gave him something, it was half a bottle of malt left by a customer. She'd held it out with hesitation, unsure if he'd even respond. But he had taken it gently, nodded once, and placed it beside him like it was made of gold. Since then, it became a quiet ritual. Every afternoon, Grace would give Mr. Leo a loaf of bread, a sachet of water, sometimes even a pack of cabin biscuits or a tin of sardine. And always, he'd receive it with a simple nod and those tired eyes that said more than words ever could. People laughed at her. "Mama Ada, you day waste your goods on that useless man." Mama Ebera, the yam seller next door, would scoff. Grace only smiled. "If I was the one sitting in dust every day, wouldn't I want someone to notice me too?" That day, her children stopped by the store after school, their uniforms dusty, their stomachs growling. "Mummy, do we still have biscuit at home?" Chuka asked, wiping sweat from his brow. I'll check," Grace replied, hiding her worry. The truth was, sales had been slow that week. She'd used most of the money to buy soap and tissue for their school. Still, when she saw Mr. Leo settle down across from the store like clockwork, she reached under her counter and pulled out a small packet of coconut crackers and a sachet of cold sachet water from the ice bucket. As she stepped outside to give it to him, Chuka tugged at her wrapper. "Mummy, we don't even have biscuit at home. Why are you giving him?" Grace knelt beside her son. "Because sometimes, my son, the little we give others returns to us in ways we cannot imagine." Chuka didn't understand, but he nodded anyway. She placed the crackers and water on the bench beside Mr. Leo. He looked up, his mouth twitching slightly, something like the beginning of a smile. Grace gave a nod and walked back to her store. But behind her, Mr. Leo stared long at her, then at her children, his eyes blinking quickly, as if fighting back a tide he couldn't explain. Later that evening, as dusk drew shadows across the red earth, Grace counted her earnings. Just 1,450 Nigerian nairas for the whole day. It wouldn't be enough to restock or even buy kerosene. Her shoulders sagged. Ada came to sit beside her, her small fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. "Mummy, that man in front of our shop. Why doesn't he talk?" "I don't know, my dear. Maybe life took his words away." Is he your friend? Grace looked at her daughter and smiled softly. Maybe he is. That night, the wind howled louder than usual. Grace wrapped her children in their threadbare wrapper and whispered prayers over their heads. She stared at the ceiling as mosquitoes sang in her ears. Her mind wandered to Mr. Leo. Who was he, really? Where did he go at night? Why did he never speak? The next day, Grace opened her store as usual. Customers came and went. She waited for him. By noon, she began to glance across the road. By 1 p.m., she stood and walked to the corner. By 2 p.m., she was pacing. Where is he? She muttered. She walked to Mama Ebra's stand. You see that old man today? The silent one? Huh. Maybe he finally melted in that sun. Who cares? Grace asked 2 motorcycle riders. Nothing. She even walked to the back of the market, where he sometimes sat to rest. He was gone. That evening, she didn't eat. She couldn't. Something heavy sat in her chest. The next morning, still no Mr. Leo. Nor the next. Grace's soul became restless. She found herself checking the roadside 10 times a day. Her customers noticed. Mama Ada, are you okay? I'm fine, she lied. But she wasn't. Something about his absence made her feel as though she'd lost a part of her daily rhythm. The space he usually occupied fell hollow, almost cursed in its silence. On the 4th day, as she closed her store early to go and fetch water, a black SUV slowly pulled up in front of her shop. Grace froze. From the passenger seat, a well-dressed young man stepped out, holding a brown envelope. He approached her without a word, handed it over, and turned to leave. Wait, what is this? Who sent you? Grace asked, confused. The man paused only long enough to say, read it. Be at the address by 4 p.m. today, and don't tell anyone. Then he disappeared back into the car, and the SUV pulled away. Grace stood there, trembling, the envelope crinkled in her hand. Her heart pounded like a drum. She opened the envelope. Inside was a note. Green Fountain Estate. 4 p.m. sharp. Come alone. From a friend. Grace looked down the road where the car had vanished, then back at the note. Green Fountain Estate, she whispered. She'd heard of it before. Rich people live there. It was far, a place she had never even dreamed of entering. She held the envelope to her chest. Who had sent it? And why? And what could possibly be waiting for her at the gates of wealth? The sun glared down on Enugu like it wanted to burn secrets into the streets. Grace stood in front of her provision store, the brown envelope pressed to her chest, her thoughts spinning like the fan blades in her landlord's parlor. The handwriting on the note inside was neat, but cold. Green Fountain Estate. 4 p.m. sharp. Come alone. From a friend. She read it again. The words didn't change. Green Fountain Estate. That was a place of marble floors and tall glass buildings. Not for women like her who measured milk with teaspoons and sold Maggie cubes one by one. It wasn't a place for widows in faded wrappers or mothers who counted every naira before going to Og Beat Market. It wasn't a place for her. And yet, she turned the key in the rusty padlock and closed her shop. Her hands trembled. Ada and Chuka were still at school. She left a note for Mama Chinello, her neighbor. If the children come back before me, please watch them. I'll return soon. By 3:20 p.m., Grace stood by the roadside, her heart thudding so loudly she could hear it over the roar of passing Kiki Napep. She hailed one and climbed in. Oga, Green Fountain Estate. The driver turned and raised an eyebrow. You sure? Grace nodded. Yes, I'm going there. The Kiki zipped off, its plastic roof rattling over every bump. Grace held her breath the entire ride, staring down at the envelope still clenched in her palm. Her thoughts screamed. Who sent this? Why today? Where's Mr. Leo? The vehicle slowed to a stop at a wide black gate flanked by 2 tall security posts. The name Green Fountain Estate was etched in gold across the marble arch. Grace stepped down, legs shaking. 2 uniformed guards approached. One of them scanned her up and down, clearly unsure what to make of her worn slippers and sweat-stained blouse. I was invited, she stammered, holding out the note. The guard took it, read it silently, then nodded to his partner. She's expected. Let her in. Expected? Grace stepped through the gate, her eyes widening as she entered a different world. Inside, The estate looked like a dream painted in gold. Smooth roads, blooming flowers, houses that stood like palaces, cars that gleamed like mirrors. Everything smelled like money. A tall man in a black suit appeared from a white Lexus Jeep parked ahead. Without a word, he motioned for her to follow. They walked down a path lined with trimmed hedges and rose bushes, stopping at a tall white building with pillars as thick as water tanks. The man opened the door and gestured her in. "Wait, please," Grace whispered, her voice cracking. Who am I meeting?" He didn't answer, just said, "He's waiting." Inside, cool air wrapped around her like a blanket. The floors were glassy. Paintings hung on the walls. Everything smelled like polish and lavender. The man led her down a long hallway, past chandeliers and golden frames, to a tall wooden door. He turned and gave her a nod. "Go in. You're safe." Grace stared at the door. Her knees felt weak. Her fingers tightened around her wrapper. She took a deep breath, then slowly pushed it open. And there, sitting in the center of the bright, elegant room, was Mr. Leo. She froze. Her legs locked. Her mouth fell open. But this was not the same man who once sat in dirt with torn shoes and bandaged feet. No, this man wore a clean white kaftan. His skin looked fresh. His hair was combed. A polished wheelchair cradled his form like it belonged in a palace. Grace stepped back. "Mr. Leo?" she gasped. He looked up. His eyes were kind, clear, calm. He raised a hand and gestured gently. She took a shaky step forward, then another. I don't understand. What is happening?" And then the impossible happened. He spoke. With a deep, clear voice, he said, "Grace, thank you for coming." She stumbled, almost tripping over the rug beneath her. "You can talk," she whispered, mouth open. "Yes," he said quietly. "I've always been able to. I just chose not to." Her hands flew to her chest. "But why? Why would you?" He motioned to the seat across from him. "Please sit." She sat, dazed, watching him like a ghost had walked into her childhood. "My name is not Leo," he said. "My real name is Justice Leonard Okonkwo. I'm a retired judge, and this estate is my home." Grace said nothing. Her throat had closed. Her head swam. "I built this place," he continued. "I own several others like it. I've spent my life in courtrooms and on advisory boards. I've ruled over cases, trained young lawyers, written policies." Grace blinked, still lost. He paused. Then, with a deep breath, he said, "But when I retired, my own children, 3 of them, sued me for control of my wealth. They accused me of hiding money. They called me mad. They put me in a hospital and tried to declare me mentally unfit so they could take everything I worked for." Grace's lips trembled. "Oh my God, I lost faith," he said, voice flat. "I left, cut myself off. I wanted to disappear, to see how the world treats the voiceless, the helpless, the invisible." He paused again and looked straight into her eyes. "That's when I became Mr. Leo. I stopped speaking. I gave up my power, my identity, my pride to test the world. And almost everyone failed." Tears sprang to Grace's eyes. She covered her mouth with her hand. "Until I met you," he said. You gave to me without asking anything in return. Even when your children had little, you still gave. Even when others mocked you, you offered kindness. You didn't pity me. You respected me." He stood up slowly. "Yes, stood." Grace gasped. "You can walk too?" "I was never truly crippled, just broken in spirit." She wept now, tears falling freely down her face. "I didn't help you because I wanted anything," she said. "I just thought you needed it. That," he said gently, "is exactly why I chose you." She looked at him with wide eyes, hands trembling. Justice Okonkwo gave a small smile. "I want to give you and your children a new life. Not just a reward, but a place of peace. I want to adopt your children as mine, and I want you to run something very dear to me." "What?" she whispered. He pointed to the tall glass windows behind him. "Come with me. Let me show you." Grace stood, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would crack her ribs. She followed him out of the room, down another corridor. Outside, a convoy of black SUVs waited in the driveway. As she entered the car, one thought echoed in her mind. The mute beggar was never a beggar at all, and now He was about to change their lives forever. The black SUV purred softly as it rolled through the high-end streets of Independence Layout. Grace sat beside Justice Leonard Okonkwo, formerly known to her as Mute, Dusty Mr. Leo, staring out the window, still unable to believe what was happening. They passed banks, five-star hotels, polished glass buildings. The streets were quiet, the trees freshly trimmed, the air smelled of luxury and jasmine. She clutched her bag tightly, the silence between them thick with questions. Justice Leonard turned to her gently. "Are your children in school now?" Grace blinked. "Why, yes, sir. They close by 2:30. He smiled. "Good. Soon, you won't have to worry about school fees again. Or rent. Or anything, really." Grace couldn't speak. Her lips parted, but her voice refused to come out. She had fed this man, given him bread and cabin biscuits from her shop. She had even shared a sachet of water when she had no extra for her own children. And now, he was promising her everything she had ever prayed for. The car turned into a private road that wound around a small, artificial lake. At the end of the road stood a grand estate, a white mansion with pillars like palaces in Abuja. A fountain gushed in the center of the driveway, and luxury cars lined the entrance. Grace's mouth opened slowly. "This is my second home," he said softly, "and one of the places I want you to know." The car stopped. The doors opened. Two suited men stepped forward and held the door for her. Justice Leonard climbed out first and turned to help her out, offering his hand with a grace that humbled her. "Come." Her legs trembled as she stepped down. The marble driveway felt too clean, too rich for her worn slippers. Inside, the mansion was a world apart. Chandeliers hung like frozen stars. A spiral staircase wound upward like a ribbon. The walls were filled with family photos. Photos of him, younger in black judicial robes, surrounded by men in suits, presidents, governors, smiling. He led her to a quiet study filled with old law books and certificates. "Please sit." She obeyed, her fingers still shaking. "I want to tell you everything," he said, settling behind his mahogany desk. "Because what I'm offering you comes from a place of deep pain and deep trust." Grace nodded, her eyes wide, waiting. Justice Leonard took a breath. "I was born in 1952. Lost my mother when I was 10. My father raised me alone. We were poor, lived in a one-room mud house in Abakba. I used to hawk groundnuts after school." Grace's breath hitched. "I studied law at Nsukka," he continued. "Became a magistrate at 29. By 40, I was a high court judge. I served with integrity. No bribery, no shortcuts. I earned everything I had." He paused. "But I fail in one place, my family." His eyes darkened. "I gave my children everything. Cars, foreign education, business capital. But I didn't give them discipline. I thought love alone was enough." He leaned back in his chair. "When I retired, I wanted peace. But they wanted power. They began forging documents, transferring money from my accounts. When I confronted them, they turned on me, said I was senile, unfit. They took me to court. My own children." Tears shimmered in Grace's eyes. "I disappeared. Faked illness. Disguised myself. I told no one. I lived on the street, on the margins, just to see the world with bare eyes. I wanted to test people, to see if anyone still had a heart without knowing I had wealth." He looked at her now, directly, deeply. "Then I met you." Grace dropped her gaze. "You had nothing, yet you gave. Every day, without expecting anything in return. No cameras, no praise, no drama, just pure heart." "Grace," he leaned forward. "You saved me." Tears now flowed down her cheeks. "I didn't save you," she whispered. I just didn't want you to be hungry." "That," he said, "is everything." He stood and walked to the bookshelf. From a drawer, he brought out a black file. He opened it, removed several documents, and placed them before her. "This is a deed of transfer for the supermarket I've built in your name." Grace stared, frozen. "This is a trust fund for your children. Nigerian Naira 50 million for their education and well-being." She shook her head slowly, as if trying to wake up from a dream. "And this," he held out another paper, "is a guardianship declaration. I want to legally adopt them, not to take them from you, but to stand as their second father, to protect them, guide them, and ensure they never suffer again. Grace burst into tears. She covered her face with both hands. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he said, kneeling beside her. You said enough every time you gave me a packet of biscuits, when you had only 2 left for your children. She sobbed into her palms. No man had knelt before her since her husband died. No man had looked her in the eye and offered her a future this wide, this safe. Justice Leonard stood and called out, "Chuka, Ada." Grace's head snapped up. From behind the door, her 2 children entered, wearing clean clothes, their eyes wide and unsure. "Mummy," Ada said, "Uncle Leo brought us here." Chuka added, "They gave us rice and chicken. Real chicken." Grace ran to them, hugging them tightly. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" "No," Ada laughed. "He's nice, Mummy. His house is big like heaven." Justice Leonard smiled. "They've been here since noon. I wanted them to see the place, to know they are welcome." Grace held her children, her heart splitting open with emotion. "From today," he said, "this is your home too." She looked up, her voice cracking. "Why me?" "Because," he said softly, "I was once a hungry child, and you reminded me that kindness still exists in this hard world. Because you gave when you had every reason not to." The door opened again. A staff member entered and whispered something into his ear. He nodded. "Everything is ready," he said, turning to Grace. "Come with me. There's one more thing I want you to see." Together, with her children holding her hands, Grace followed him outside. A large truck with a ribbon wrapped around it sat in the driveway. The side of the truck was painted with bright colors, and in bold letters it read, "Grace's Food Mission, feeding Enugu with love." She gasped. "This," he said, "is the charity we'll run together. Every week, we'll go to bus parks, bridges, markets, feeding people who live the life I lived for 2 years. People you understand." She covered her mouth with both hands, speechless. "It's time to give back," he said, but from a place of strength. As the sun set behind the estate walls, casting a golden glow across the gardens, Grace looked at the man who used to sit in silence across her shop, whose shoes were once wrapped in newspaper. Now he stood as a father, a friend, a protector, and through her tears, she whispered, "Thank you, sir, for everything." Justice Leonard smiled. "No, Grace. Thank you." It had been 3 weeks since Grace and her children moved into the estate, yet every morning still felt like a dream wrapped in fine linen and lavender air. Their new home was a 2-story duplex behind Justice Leonard's mansion, fully furnished, with a fridge that hummed gently through the night and water that ran without Grace needing to fetch it in a yellow jerrycan. Each child had their own room. Ada covered her walls with colorful paper hearts. Chuka filled his shelf with toy cars and picture books. Grace's room was quiet, warm, and full of something she hadn't known in years, peace. But she didn't let comfort make her forget. Every morning at 6 a.m., she woke up, tied her wrapper, and knelt by her window. "Thank you, God," she whispered. "Thank you for not forgetting me." Downstairs, breakfast waited. Toast, eggs, tea with milk, sometimes pap with moi moi. Always something hot. Always something she never thought she'd eat again without stress or shame. She had come a long way from selling packs of Milo and cabin biscuits under a leaking zinc roof. Now, she stood at the helm of a brand new life. But it wasn't the riches or the estate that made her weep at night. It was the fact that someone saw her, truly saw her, in a world that often ignored women like her. One morning, Justice Leonard stood in her doorway, holding a file. "Grace, are you ready?" he asked, a gentle smile on his lips. She nodded. "Yes, sir. Just give me 1 minute." They were heading to the opening ceremony of Grace's Place, the new supermarket and restaurant built in her honor. Located in New Haven, one of Enugu's most vibrant commercial districts, it was already the talk of town. From its polished glass doors to its rooftop lounge and bakery corner, everything had been built with elegance and love. When they arrived, Grace froze. Cameras clicked. People gathered. Staff in uniforms lined up by the door, clapping. A red ribbon waited across the entrance. Above it hung a wide sign that read, "Grace's Place, home of heartfelt service." Her breath caught. She took a step forward, overwhelmed. Justice Leonard touched her shoulder. "This is yours now. You earned it." She nodded slowly, tears threatening to spill. He handed her a pair of gold-handled scissors. Her fingers trembled as she cut the ribbon. Applause exploded. From that day, Grace's place became more than a store. It became a symbol. People came not just to buy groceries or eat steaming rice and pepper soup, but to see the woman behind the miracle. Customers greeted her with reverence. Some told her, "I watched your story on TV," while others whispered, "You gave me hope." But Grace stayed humble. She still wiped tables herself. She still picked up biscuit wrappers dropped by customers. When people bowed to her, she bowed right back. Yet amid the success, Grace's heart remained with the streets she came from. Each Saturday, a white food truck pulled out of the estate gates, bearing the name. Grace's food mission, feeding Enugu with love. Grace rode in the front seat, wearing a simple white t-shirt and jeans. Behind her, boxes of jollof rice, beans, water sachets, bread, and boiled eggs waited to be served. Their first stop was under the flyover at Holy Ghost. Street boys sat in clusters, their eyes wide as the truck parked. "Mama," one of them shouted, "are you the one giving this food?" Grace smiled. "Yes, my son. Come, eat." One by one, they formed a line. Some barefoot, some shirtless. One small girl carried a baby tied on her back. Grace gave her 2 food packs. "You deserve more," she whispered. The girl nodded, tears in her eyes. As the truck moved to its next location, near Uwani Market, Grace turned to her team. "This," she said, "is why we can't stop. People are hungry, not just for food, but for love." Every week, she made sure the truck ran. Justice Leonard often joined. Dressed simply, he handed out water and bread with calm dignity. One afternoon, as they packed up empty trays, he turned to Grace and said, "You've done more in 2 months than some do in 10 years. Grace looked away shy. "I'm just doing what I wish someone had done for me." He nodded. That's what makes it powerful. The following Sunday, a dedication was held in church. Justice Leonard stood before the altar with Grace and her children beside him. The congregation listened in silence as he told the story. How a poor widow gave with her last. How he tested humanity and found it in a small provision store in Coal Camp. When the service ended, people came forward weeping. "You're a blessing, madam," one woman whispered. "You reminded me that good still exists." Grace smiled but didn't take the glory. "All thanks to God," she said, "and to the man who saw me even when I didn't see myself." Later that week, Ada and Chuka sat on the floor of their new living room, drawing on white cardboard. "Uncle Leo," Ada said, "when I grow up, I want to help poor people like Mummy." Justice Leonard smiled. "Then you'll be even greater than I am." Chuka held up his drawing. It was a picture of their old store. "This is where the miracle started," he said proudly. Grace walked in and looked at it. She knelt beside him. "Yes, baby. That's where we learned that even with nothing, we can give everything." She hugged them both tightly. Months passed. Grace became a voice on local radio, sharing her story to encourage other struggling women. She was invited to women's empowerment programs and began sponsoring widows with startup money for their own businesses. One day, she stood at a conference in Akka, dressed in a bright yellow lace and holding a microphone. "I used to think I was cursed," she told the room. "I lost my husband. I lost my income. I almost lost hope. But the day I gave a packet of biscuits to a silent man in torn clothes, I planted a seed of kindness. That seed grew. And now, I'm here not because I was lucky, but because I didn't stop believing in good, even when it didn't look back at me." Applause thundered through the hall. After the event, a young girl approached her, barefoot, carrying a baby on her hip. "Auntie, I want to be like you," she said shyly. Grace bent and placed her hand gently on the girl's shoulder. "You already are. You care, and that's where greatness begins." Back at the estate, under the soft golden lights of her home, Grace sat on the balcony with a cup of tea. Justice Leonard sat beside her, quietly watching the stars. "You changed my life," she said. He turned. "You gave me back my faith." They didn't speak for a while. They didn't need to. Above them, the night sky stretched wide, full of stories waiting to be told. And below, in the streets of Enugu, a white truck was getting ready, loaded with warm food and warmer hearts. Grace looked at the stars and whispered a prayer, not for herself, but for the next person who might sit in the dust, waiting to be seen. Because she now knew what the world often forgot. Kindness is never wasted.